Everybody just arrives in our townships and rural areas and set up businesses without licenses and permits. We are going to bring this to an end.
If some of these criminal elements are saying they're seeking amnesty in our country, I'm calling on the national government, Home Affairs in particular, please protect our residents, protect our country. Yeah. Don't play. We cannot afford to have South Africa as a failed state, allowing criminals to be in our country.
Today, refugees and migrants still face many challenges with integrating into local communities in South Africa. Their reality is that they are viewed with skepticism, labeled as criminals, drug dealers, or as foreign nationals stealing jobs and women. They are often told to go back to where they came from.
I came to South Africa in 2011, month of July, when my town was attacked by the rebellion. They were killing people, many people passed away. We lost many contacts and many members of our families. So we decided to run, me and my children, until when we reached to South Africa, after 2 months. I decided to come to South Africa because I was thinking that here I'm gonna make the life of my kids in the country is safe, there is no war compared to other countries. The father of my children, I lost any contact with him when we ran the war. Until now, I don't have any news about him. I'm a single mother. I'm struggling alone to survive with the kids.
The major reason why I moved here, I decided to move here, was basically of a greener pasture. We all want something to live better, to enjoy life, to enjoy peace, you know. And since my government couldn't give it to me, my government couldn't give it to me. Even when you go to school, you still find it difficult. So I have diploma in mechanical engineering. I'm working. Not like they say every Nigerians we are into drugs or whatever. So not with me.
The time I get my paper, I start selling straight on the street. To reach today, 2019, it's not easy. Living in South Africa is really tough. I can't do any crime or any crime for me to make a money. Because if I can do a slight mistake, they deport me to my enemy, I'm gone. One of the diplomats ever told me in 2009 that, Julius, if you can land in Juba, your name is in the list, national security. It's waiting for you. Till today, I don't have any place. Now I cannot do any, I have to rely on this. And I don't have future. Where, what to do? I have to continue.
My name is Tonderai Matanda. I was born in Harare, Zimbabwe, and I was raised there. I came to South Africa in 2013 to pursue my higher education studies in law. My personal relationships with people, especially when I consider my relationships with South Africans, local South Africans, have been nothing less than positive. However, I have experienced some institutional challenges. For me to be here, I have to be on a study permit, as you know. It's a legal requirement. I cannot study without one. Progressively, since I started my university studies in 2013, it has been quite difficult to get the documentation that I require. The experience has been worse and worse, and it has been certainly a push factor for me to consider a move away from here to further my studies as well.
Accusations of the failure of state institutions such as the Department of Home Affairs to adequately address and process the necessary documentation needed by migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers alike to integrate into society arguably translates into some of the socio-economic problems faced by the migrant community.
When we came here, we fell under the refugee system, but how that works is you have to apply first. There's a whole process that's laid out in this is the Refugees Act. So there's a whole process you have to follow, and it has time limits on it. So from 2006, we have been at the first stage of it, which is the asylum seeker process, the asylum seeker step. So you can imagine I've been here for 12 years. I've gone through high school, I've gone through university. I'm now starting to just get into the employment scene, and we're still waiting to be determined, you know. So that has proven to be a challenge for me, because every 6 months we must go and have our permits extended for another 6 months. So for the past 12 years, it's been on a 6-month basis. There was a time when it actually moved to 3 months. So it would be every 3 months you must go and have your permit extended, which I don't have a problem with, because we have to abide by the law. I can't just expect to live in a place without being documented and honoring the law of the country. But at the same time, it's a bit of a frustration when the delay is not on your part. And I'm not trying to name and shame or point fingers, but surely after 12 years, a person's status should be determined. Right now, as I sit here, I've done everything I need to do to get to a point where I can be admitted as an attorney. However, I need a permanent residency or citizenship. Other than that, I cannot be admitted as an attorney. So I have gone through the whole process, but now here's a stumbling block. And it's a bit frustrating, because every 6 months I must go, only for my permit to get extended for another 6 months, and I'm now in a situation where I don't know what's going on and what to expect. So I'm kind of stuck there. And that is a frustration, to be honest. It's a frustration.
Since I came to South Africa, and it was in November 2011, until now we passed through many challenges, especially the problem of documentation is a big challenge, and it makes our life to struggle, me and my children. I'm a street vendor. My income is not enough. I have to pay rent. I have to pay school transport for my kids. I have to buy grocery. But I have also to save money to travel to Messina. I'm staying in town, and it's very far. From here to Messina, we spend all the day of traveling, and we have to spend a lot of money. Me and all the children, I spend 4,025 to go to Messina for extension of the asylum seeker, and that is every after 6 months. Sometimes we go after 3 months, and that is a big challenge. About that documentation, we cannot apply for work. We can't work because he's asylum seeker. Now it's 6 years. About next year, I'm gonna turn 7 years in this country. I'm still asylum seeker, and I'm not alone. We are many families. We are suffering. We are struggling. Others, they even stop to go to renew the document because they are not available. They are not able to afford the money to pay transport. If I don't have that document, kids cannot go to school, and that is the reason why I'm still going to Messina. If it was not my the school of my kids, I was going to leave or to take another decision, because we are struggling too much.
In light of the difficulties that I've experienced in trying to stay legally, I don't see any kind of change coming soon in the way of policy by the state, and in fact I foresee a lot more difficulty in light of statements made by government officials concerning their migration policy. In a sense, I don't feel welcomed by the state, even though I feel that the nationals of South Africa, especially those I've interacted with, are welcoming and do want me to stay. Specifically, the difficulty in attaining legal status in South Africa militates heavily against staying here. So for that reason alone, I would look to move elsewhere or move back home.
Things like speaking a mother language or walking in the streets without feeling like a stranger are all memories for them now. Rather, a wave of gruesome, sporadic xenophobic attacks have become a trend for migrants.
So we hear narratives of jobs being taken, we hear narratives of the local populations not having enough access to health or to adequate housing, and the rest of them. But then, if we really dig into the truth of this, we would realize that, in fact, migrants are not necessarily taking jobs. They're not necessarily, depriving people of access. But in fact, what statistics and in fact, what researchers come shows is that migrants actually contribute significantly to economies. I mean, they employ even local populations within the state, and that is really imperative, especially for a state that seeks to position itself within the narrative of globalization.
Yes, we are here to look for jobs, but we are not here to steal jobs from anyone. The thing is that, how does a foreigner come and steal a job from a citizen who is being here, and yet I just came yesterday into the country and I steal a job from you? Obviously, there are certain procedures that are applicable for someone to dismiss an employee if they are to be dismissed for the sake of a foreigner. But as I said earlier on, there are also certain procedures before an employer can take a foreigner. They have to make sure that there is no South African citizen or permanent resident of South Africa who can fill in that position. So there is enough protection in South African law to protect the citizens and say that, look, there is no one really stealing your job. It's just because maybe you were not qualified for that job. It's because maybe you were not really available for that job. I don't know, for whatever reason. But then to say that someone stole someone's job, it would mean, in my opinion, that then I would have come to your workplace, I displaced you as a South African citizen, and you were basically unfairly dismissed, of which obviously you have remedies for unfair dismissal. I doubt that that would be a reasonable conclusion to say that foreigners just come to steal jobs. Yeah.
Which job do I take from South Africa? I'm relying on the streets to sell that sweet, to pay a rent, stuff, to pay that rent, stuff, to fill another month again, 1 year reach to pass, stuff. Which job do I? If I go to ask you a job, do you have green ID book? We can give you a job, but do you have green ID book? No green ID book. So, yeah.
I think it's quite sad, really, and it's unfair to say that Zimbabweans are here looking to take away jobs. If you look at it, most people are pushed here because of desperate circumstances back home, and there's really no other alternative for them. There has been in the past a lot of solidarity with South Africans, particularly considering the difficult history that South Africa has had, and that Zimbabwe itself gained its independence earlier than South Africa, and a lot of refugees from South Africa, refugees from the violence that was here in South Africa and the political persecution that was here in South Africa, actually got refuge from my home country. So I feel that as Africans we have a basic duty of solidarity amongst each other to be considerate to our circumstances. Of course, Zimbabweans are not here to make life difficult for South Africans. We're not here to compete. We're here trying to survive, and others amongst us are here trying to get an education to prepare for a better future that we all believe lies ahead for our country.
It's been a thing of just accepting the fact that you'll never really be fully accepted, or you'll never really fully feel at home. And there's been times when I've told myself that I'm not gonna start a life here. I'd rather than go to a place like Canada where I feel they want foreigners. And you see, that's also sort of, I know it's a perception that I have that cannot really be used as a valid point because I've not experienced the situation in Canada. But the perceived image of Canada is they want foreigners. And, you know, when you go there, you're not going to feel as discriminated against as when you're here. So it's thoughts like that have come up where I'm like, I'd rather than just relocate and go to a country where I feel accepted and at home. And I honestly don't feel it should be that way.
Those times when I think about South Africa, growing up, it was about this beacon of democratic values, the beacon of human rights. It was almost like the country that could win a Nobel Prize, if countries could win Nobel Prizes. And it was because it was such a promising country at the time, and of course we've seen evidence of it also resonating in terms of what society should be. I mean, even when we think about transitional justice, you often mention South Africa because it was a huge success to see how people can come from the place of deep hurt to forgive. And when we think about that history that South Africa has had, in relation to how it has overcome significant challenges that could have torn the nation apart. Now, going forward, you would also expect that the country will also reveal itself as being strong and being, of course, being able to sustain that narrative of itself over time. So when we see the counter narrative, which is people being killed, say for instance, because of due to xenophobic violence, or migrants being stopped to be shot out of the country, or narratives coming up about that are anti what we've known South Africa to become, then it really becomes quite troubling. And of course, it is troubling because we understand that that's not how the country is. And it's important for us to change that narrative. And that's why having that engagement is important. So I think it is, in fact, very good that we're talking about South Africa being the beacon of hope and, being the beacon of democracy, being the beacon of human rights, being the beacon of social justice, and really being that country that could hold its face out to the world to say, what, here is how we have been able to overcome our differences. Here is a fantastic example of diversity working in practice. And when we see some of these rough edges, people, tensions within societies, it's important for us to find how we can correct them. And as such, to speak of South Africa, as a global example of hope and progress and of human rights and democracy is really, I think, a significant place the country is at. And I think having these conversations around protection of refugees and migrants actually is to smoothen those rough edges, to ensure that it actually leaves out what we've always known it to be.